at that point of time. He said today it is 7 times the number per thousand. You would be surprised to learn that the US is one society which has the largest per capita inmates in prison of any society in the world. And he said that there are 4 countries in the world that are responsible for 90% of the capital punishment. And he said that's Iran, Russia, China, and the United States. So the point I'm making is that there is one society like the US, which is by far the most prosperous society in the world. And then you have the Scandinavian countries, where you have a very strong welfare state. People are rich, they are generating huge quantities of wealth, but at the same time, they are also taking care of the problems of society at large. So, it's really a question of developing a model that is sensitive to the problem of poverty. I don't think wealth creation necessarily requires that you also create poverty. You can take care of both at the same time.
From first floor, can we take one more question, please?
Good morning. Dr. Pachauri has emphasized on the corporate social responsibility and the outcome document of the...
We're not getting the audio very clearly.
Am I audible?
Yes, it's better now. Please go ahead.
So, Dr. Pachauri has emphasized on the corporate social responsibility, and the Rio 20 outcome document also emphasized a lot on CSR. Now, Dr. Pachauri, I would like to ask from you that based on your experience through some examples, where you can find that the corporates have really contributed towards the sustainable development. Sir, please.
Well, I can give you one single example. My institute has launched a program a few years ago called Lighting a Billion Lives. You're probably aware that there are almost 400 million people in this country who have no access to electricity. Can you imagine? These are people who don't have a single bulb in their homes. And therefore, my colleagues and I decided that we'll develop solar lanterns, low cost, lightweight, LED-based lanterns, where we train women in villages to charge these solar lanterns during the daytime using a solar panel on the roof, and then rent them out at night to the rest of the village. And I'm happy to say that this whole program has been supported largely by corporate organizations. And you could ask, what benefit is it to those companies that are providing money for this kind of an activity? There's perhaps no direct benefit to them, but at the same time, they are serving the interests of society. So, since you wanted an example, I'm giving you this single example. We have covered over 2,000 villages in the country, which is still a very small number, but I'm reasonably sure that this will snowball, and it's just a matter of time. And I would like to see corporate organizations support programs of this nature, because you have no idea what difference it makes to a household when they get clean lighting of this form. Children can do their homework, women can cook much better, and they are not taking in all those harmful fumes that come, let's say, from a kerosene lamp. All of which is very, very harmful to the health of people sitting around them. So there are multiple benefits from a program of this nature. And I think if companies were to get involved and perhaps even launch programs of this nature, they would be serving the interests of society.
Yeah.
There's one more question.
Can you please pass the mic to her?
Good morning, sir. My question to you is, nowadays land use change and forestry is one of the major concern for climate change. And as we all know, in India, urbanization is on peak nowadays. So how can we go for urbanization without environmental degradation? As we know, urbanization is leading to depletion of natural resources, degradation of forestry, de- uh, deforestation, and that agricultural degradation. So how can we go for inclusive growth of with urbanization?
You know, we can be very sensitive to protecting the environment even in urban areas. I mean, you take a city like Delhi, there are areas which are very green, which are very well maintained. And I think what we really need is a pattern of urbanization which also maintains some semblance of natural beauty, natural resources being maintained. And quite apart from the fact that, you know, urbanization, yes, does destroy agricultural land, but don't forget that there's a large area of land in this country where there's no conflict between urbanization. And we have damaged some of those areas as well. Our forests, I mean, I was born in Nainital in the mountains, and I can tell you, I find it tragic to go to that part of the world and to see how forests have been degraded in those areas, as a result of which the streams of water that you had have dried up, as a result of which soil erosion, which has become so common, is now more or less an annual occurrence. So, you know, let us start fixing some of those areas. There is so much that we can do. And of course, when we carry out urbanization, we should do that clearly keeping in mind some semblance of ecological stability, even in urban areas. You can have green cities. You don't necessarily have to have cities which completely destroy all the green cover that you have. I mean, I want to give you an example. You know, Safdarjung Airport, it's an empty area. I have gone and spoken to every political leader and I said, let's convert that into an urban jungle. It's a waste of that area. That airstrip will never be used, that entire area. Why don't we convert some of these open spaces into green spaces? It would make such a difference to urban life. But of course, you always get stuck between one department and the other. And I've been trying very hard, but I've not succeeded in convincing anyone. One of these days, I hope it will happen.
I think we have time only for one more question.
Good morning, Dr. Pachauri. It's indeed a pleasure to have heard you. I've been an earnest follower of you as an alumni, and I've been working in organizations where we've been associated with you for the Lantern program, which is making electronics. And I have seen you holding those lanterns in the Energy Summit in Chicago with Al Gore and the other eminent speakers in that summit. My question is on the same front. There are many green initiatives that are going on. But my question to you is on the role of the government. For example, the energy solar lanterns that you pursue through your organization and Terry as some of the programs that you do. I have a vision for example, we have all the farming land which has been marked. If at the boundaries we just put the solar panels and feed this grid into the main grid, I think overnight we can come out with problems like the energy. Such kind of programs, we don't see the government really pursuing and following, which is, I think, expected out of the government. I'd like to hear your comments on that.
You know, I think we really have to think out of the box. You take a city like Delhi, and this is something which I hope will happen because I'm trying to push the government of Delhi for a solar roof program. See, this city has very few high-rise buildings. So therefore, if you look at the amount of area of roof surface that you have relative to the volume of housing that you've got, it makes a lot of sense to promote a solar roofs program. if we were to do that and, ensure that you generate power on the roof of every house that perhaps has some space, you can not only use that electricity in the home, but you can feed it back into the grid. It'll make such a difference to the city of Delhi. Simple thing like solar water heating. I mean, everybody in this city uses hot water. That's very good. But I think this is something that has to be promoted throughout the city. And if we were to do that, it would make a difference of several 100 megawatts of power being produced within the city. And if we were to do that, then clearly some of the problems that we have in the city of Delhi with power supply could easily be sorted out. So I really think we need to think out of the box, and I think we need leadership that is willing to take some of these actions, involving a little bit of risk, certainly involving some degree of resources being allocated. All of this can make an enormous difference to the future. So I hope it will happen, and we get some leaders that are willing to take some of these steps in the future.
So can we just take one last question from our foreign exchange students? We would like to take one question from our visiting students from foreign universities. Any of you would like to ask a question? I am sure the issues of sustainability, inclusive growth are as pertinent to your country.
I have read so many articles. I have heard you in your most of the interviews. And the question which I'm going to ask is about the work that you have done, that you have pioneered, that is the climate change. Lot of UN cry about the climate changes there at present. It is devastating the ecosystems. It is bringing in so many types of disasters. But the question which I put here is that, is it really a reality? Because there are certain articles which say that it is natural for the earth to have its climate change. Because initially there was ice ages, and then today there is a shift in the climate of certain places and things like that. So is it really happening? I want to hear it from you, sir.
Well, if you want to hear it from me, here it is. All right.
Thank you, sir.
The climate of the earth changes for two reasons: natural factors as well as human-induced factors. But the reality is that over the last 60 or 70 years, whatever changes in climate have taken place, and we have used the term, are very likely the result of increase in the concentration of greenhouse gases, human-induced greenhouse gases. And when we use the term very likely, we are assigning a probability of 90% or more. So yes, over a geological time frame, climate changes because of natural factors. But today, in this short period of time, human society is now changing the climate.